we've got to protect the position of sport in general and Formula One in particular, because what I don't want to do is wake up one day and find that Britain, the home of Formula One and the Grand Prix, has chucked the damn lot out.
So in other words...
First of all, the money had been taken and spent. As Sir Patrick Neal himself said, no criticism can fairly be made of the receipt of the original
No, we've already
donation.
dealt with that, but he didn't talk about that and the meeting in combination. He talked merely about the receipt of that.
I know, but at that point in time, my judgment, you know, we can go around this for ages, my judgment was that the potential of a conflict of interest would arise when we specifically exempted Formula One. Now, you may disagree and say, well, you should have done it 2 weeks before rather than when you did it. The point that I'm making to you is that we did it without any compulsion whatever, before any press inquiry had been made whatever, before anybody could have said to us, well, Mr. Eccleston has, you know, offered to give further donations or whatever. So all I'm trying to say to you is, you know, you may disagree with the steps that we took, or say you could have taken this step earlier or that step earlier. Well, but I ask you, you know, in circumstances where we turn down further donations, we then write to Sir Patrick Neal, we accept Sir Patrick Neal's advice, we carry it through. Well, you know, you can disagree about the various judgments along the way, but I mean, you know, it's hardly the act of people that are...
Okay, but as you say, and was he taking notes? Was he taking notes?
Well, I want to deal with this specifically, because, I mean, I'm just, you know, furious at this idea that people sort of say, well, you know, you had the meeting, there was no formal minute taken, as if I'd instructed this to happen. I gave no... The meeting, as I say, lasted, I think, just under 20 minutes. There was a private secretary there.
A senior figure in the civil service.
Exactly. Yep. He took a note of it. He did not make it into a formal minute because there was no decision taken at that meeting, and nothing actually new was said really on either side. I have subsequently asked that he put his notes, which are the handwritten notes, in writing, fill it out with any other recollections he has of the meeting, and I'm perfectly happy to publish that. I mean, I don't want to set a precedent, I'm not going back publishing everything, but I'm perfectly happy to publish his notes of that meeting, and I never gave any instructions about whether minutes should be published or not published, notes taken or not taken. And, you know, it was a meeting of less than, as I say, 20 minutes, or just under 20 minutes, in the midst of a whole series of other things. And this suggestion that I somehow, which is the implicit suggestion, said, well, don't, you know, don't, this is a sort of dodgy meeting, don't take a note or a minute of it. It's rubbish, and people can see them. I'm not setting a precedent for that, incidentally, because otherwise people will be asking me to publish every...
Nice to have all the minutes of all the meetings, really.
Yeah,
but why didn't you mind? Well, because loads of
questions...
Because we've done
nothing wrong.
Because loads... Well, but we're talking about appearances.
Well,
the point Martin Bell made in the House of Commons.
As long as we are talking about appearances, I mean, that's
what some people are talking about. Other people are raising suspicions, which is why we're having this
but let them
interview
just spit them out. And if there are any suspicions people have got, they can put it to me, you know, bluntly, rather than sort of, you know, in this sort of covert way. But let me just say to you, okay, you can argue for appearances' sake, we should have done lots of different things. But I was, and this is where, you know, I said to you right at the very beginning of this, I apologise for the way that we handled this. I mean, I should have realised this was going to blow up into this huge thing. But, you know, you don't normally publish the notes of these meetings, and I resent the fact that people are suggesting that somehow Bernie Eccleston came in to see me and started talking about fundraising.
But you see, this is part of the problem.
I'm perfectly happy, yeah.
Right, so that'll be in the...
Yeah, you can see exactly what was said, and you'll see that what I'm saying to Mr. Eccleston, I mean, he makes the case. What I say to him is, look, of course we see the case for Formula One, but we also want to see a ban on tobacco advertising. But let me just say this to you. The European Union directive, the previous government blocked consistently. We agree in principle to it. If we agree it, even with the exemption for Formula One, there will be the biggest reduction in advertising sponsorship in respect of tobacco this country or Europe has ever seen. Not that you think that if you read the coverage of it, but anyway.
On this, you conceded that there'd be this million, of course, but you didn't then say, well, and by the way, we're asking them, and we think they agreed to give us another bunch of money.
But again, let me just deal with this. My whole focus was on the original donation, for a very simple reason, that though we thought there'd been a firm commitment to further donation to the Labour Party back in May, before the European directive had been thought of, no money had actually ever been received or paid over, and I had then rescinded, as it were, the offer, because I'd said to the people back then, well, you can't do this. So it couldn't have had any possible impact on it. And my entire focus then was on the original donation, because that's what I thought people would think. Well, come on, you know, there was £1 million paid before the election, and now they're changing the policy. I mean, actually, I'd even like to come and deal with that, but you know, that we appear to be changing the policy to favour Mr. Eccleston. But the only reason anyone knows about a further offer that was made is because we disclosed it to Sir Patrick Neil. Now, you can say to me again, well, shouldn't you have gone through that in the House of Commons? All I can say to you is I was focused on the original donation.
But you can see why people like Ian Duncan Smith suggesting that you misled the House, because you didn't disclose that.
Well, I certainly did not mislead the House. And, you know, it's just absurd to say that in circumstances where the only reason that anybody knows there was a further offer was because I disclosed it.
But you knew about it at the time, in the House, when you stood there on that Wednesday.
I had already disclosed it to Sir Patrick Neil. The reason I didn't consider
it... Sir Patrick Neil, you didn't tell the House?
Well, Sir Patrick Neil, and then who copied the letters to the other members of his committee. But what I'm saying to you is that I did not consider that important at the time because we'd never received any money and we'd already rescinded any commitment for more money. So what I thought was the difficulty in this situation, and again you can say, well, you should have thought this further offer would be a problem. You know, what I thought was, well, here we are actually turning away further donations. So I don't think that's a problem, but surely the problem is what happens to this original gift.
So what? So you said he hadn't offered you any more.
You could have said that, but all I'm doing is explaining that my focus was on the original gift because that's where all the glory was. Well, you can say you should have done the rest, but all I say, well,
do you regret that?
No, I explain it by saying that at the time, that was not what was uppermost in my mind, and I'd already disclosed it to Sir Patrick Neil. I mean, you can argue about whether it could have been done or not, but it was there in the letter to Sir Patrick Neil, and that's the reason why people know about it. Now, again, you can say, well, that was not properly handled, but, you know, I simply say to you, John, how many times before now has any political party ever consulted the watchdog, got his advice, published it, followed it, turned away further donations? So we've not merely exempted Formula One, we've actually lost the Labour Party a considerable sum of money because we took the right policy decision.
Right, so...
I'm not saying it's wrong to have accepted money from Mr. Eccleston. We're perfectly entitled
to
do so,
we don't.
And nobody's made any criticism of that. I'm not saying that it was wrong to be Bernie Eccleston, because it would be bizarre if someone was in a worse position as having donated the Labour Party than a better one. And I am not saying it was wrong to consult Sir Patrick Neil. I believe it was right to consult Sir Patrick Neil. What was wrong was, as you say, it should not have come out in dribs and drabs, and we should have focused on this issue a lot earlier.
Two members of your own National Executive Committee, Ken Livingstone and Diane Abbott, say there ought to be an inquiry into this whole thing. Would that be sensible now? Clear it all up? Do you want to do that?
No, there is absolutely no need for that at all. Sir Patrick Neil is looking at all these matters. And let me just say another couple of things about this too, in relation to party funding. The Labour Party is in this position because we disclose the names of our donors. No other political party does. And I want to say to you, I am perfectly happy to disclose the names of donors...
Immediately?
Yes, going back from 1992, in other words, the election, you know, when we started to build up to the last general election, to now, provided that it is not just the Labour Party that has to do this, but the other political parties.
And will you disclose them when you get the money? Because I talked to Gordon Brown last Monday, and he said, I don't know anything about any donation from Bernie Eccleston. Will you, when you get the money in, will you say, yeah, this is what we've got? Not wait for a year or whatever it happens to be.
I'm perfectly happy to disclose the names when we receive donations. The question then arises, well, do you disclose the amount of the donation? The donations that have been given to the Labour Party up to now have been donations given with the amount being kept confidential. But again, I am perfectly happy to supply Sir Patrick Neil with a list of the donations and the amounts, provided the Labour Party is not singled out.
Well, legislate.
And the Conservatives do it as
Make
well.
everybody do it.
Well, that's exactly what I want to do. The other thing I wanted to say to you was that when Sir Patrick Neil comes to look at party political funding, I hope very much we do look at not merely on the rules of disclosure, but proper monitoring, on a limit on the amount of money that can be paid over.
Do you think yourself?
Well, I mean, I think you can argue about this, but I think it's, you could say, if you wanted, that it was a 5,000 limit and no more. I mean, I'm not committing myself to that.
So that might be, but you might agree to that, a 5,000 limit.
If Sir Patrick Neil was to recommend that, I think we certainly would agree to it.
You'd be happy with that. And what about a limit on total spending?
As long as it's the same for both parties.
Well, but then that's in your power, isn't it? You can pass a law.
Well,
you've got a big enough majority, haven't you?
Of course, we can pass a law. And if, as I say, I am perfectly happy to pass that information over to Sir Patrick Neil now, provided the other political parties do it too. Because, you know, we're in a situation today, for example, I mean, there's poor David Sainsbury getting absolutely pillory on the basis of because he's a supporter of the Labour Party.
He's also made a large shame for an
Yeah, but let's just analyse this a minute, because this is where, as I say, look, I've said we didn't handle things in the right way, and I've said that to you, and I've been through all the points that you've asked me, and I think you would agree that I have tried to answer all those points. What is completely ridiculous is to start... David Sainsbury's name is published in the Labour Party accounts. That's the only reason anyone knows about him. This planning application was, as far as I can work out, was decided by a planning inspector. You know, the idea that because David Sainsbury gave to the Labour Party that some planning inspector decided a planning application for Sainsbury's, I mean, it's ridiculous.
So isn't that